Hello, and welcome back to the Big Book Project. I'm your host, Lori Feathers, and we are reading and discussing the magnificent novel by Roberto Bolaño, 2666. This is the second podcast slash video for the project, but you can join us twice a week on Substack, where we're writing and commenting about the book and about the reading. The reading schedule is also on the Substack, and I hope that you'll join us there and also enjoy these occasional videos and opportunities for me to kind of get into some issues or angles of some things that I think Bolaño is doing that I find interesting, and hopefully you will too. So the first one that I want to talk about today, and these relate primarily to part 3 of the novel, which we are reading this week, the week of January 26th, and that is the part about fate. And I want to talk a little bit about the speech that the Black Panther co-founder Barry Seaman gives to the congregation, where he talks about his life, and fate is in attendance. Fate is one of the principal characters that we obviously are looking at in the part about fate. The character's name is Oscar Fate, and Seaman breaks down his speech into 4 parts, and I want to talk specifically about the segment that he calls the stars, or in which he talks about his interest in the stars and what he thinks that it means. He says that the stars that we see at night might live for millions of years, or alternatively have been dead for millions of years already. We just never know when we see them up in the sky. And I'm going to quote from Seaman here. He says, "Stars exist in the realm of semblances, the same way that dreams are semblances." So what he's saying here is we don't know if what we see or experience is real or is a dream. Maybe a dream that's taken the semblance of reality. And I think that this idea of semblances kind of echoes throughout this book in a really interesting way. Seaman talks about that semblances are metaphors for ways of losing ourselves. And this is a really remarkable kind of turn of phrase that I think he uses as an analogy to semblances. He says that it's like treading water in a sea of seeming, sea being, of course, SEA. And this reminds me a bit of our character Amalfitano. You remember that he, in the second part of the novel, which is the part about Amalfitano, says that he is thinking and having ideas, feelings, ramblings, and he sees that these are a way of making pain tolerable. So I kind of see this idea of treading water in a sea of seeming, or a sea of semblances, whether that be dreams or voices or visions, as another way to endure injustices and pain, which is what Amalfitano was talking about as well, that we kind of occupy our minds consciously or subconsciously with these things, and it's all our bodies and our minds' responses to dealing with the pain and injustice in the world. And in connection with our character Fate, I wanted to kind of throw out the question whether or not Fate has ultimately succumbed to the injustices in the world by changing his name. You'll remember that Oscar Fate is not his real name, but we're just told in the chapter towards the beginning that everyone at work called him Oscar Fate. And then throughout the rest of the chapter, he's just known as Oscar Fate, introduces himself as Oscar Fate. And that kind of seems significant to me because perhaps he's allowing the direction that his life is taking or will take and his intentions to be determined by outside forces. Maybe these injustices and this pain of the world, rather than kind of dealing in semblances or ideas, feelings, ramblings, as Amalfitano does, or this treading water in the sea of semblances like Barry Seaman talks about. Maybe fate has kind of given up. Maybe he's just allowing the world to take him where it goes. And we know that he's dealing with a very real pain, the recent death of his mother, which is very heavy on his mind throughout this chapter. Another idea that I wanted to share with you all today is something that comes up when Oscar Fate meets a local reporter in Santa Teresa. This is the reporter Chucho Flores. And Chucho Flores is a newspaper reporter in Santa Teresa, but he's also a local radio personality. And he talks to Fate about the femicides in Santa Teresa. And he says that everyone is talking about them right now because the numbers are up. He says it's news again. Reporters are talking about it. People are talking about it. And he says, quote, "The story grows like a snowball until the sun comes out and the whole damn ball melts. And everybody forgets about it and goes back to work." And then after he says this, Chucho Flores takes out a pencil and a notepad, and he just starts kind of very intently, and Fate notices with some talent, sketching portraits of women, their faces. Some of the women's faces have their eyes closed. Some of them are looking away, but Fate notes as well that none of the women were pretty. Chucho Flores also tells Fate that according to local legend, there's a single killer that's responsible for these 200 plus femicides that have taken place over a number of years. But Chucho doesn't believe that is possible. He says that's not even possible for a Mexican killer. He tells Fate that the women just disappear, and after a while, their bodies are found in the desert. They're dumped there. Chucho also tells Fate that Santa Teresa is a big city, a real city, he calls it. He says it has plenty of money and poverty, imagination and bureaucracy, violence and the desire to work in peace. He says, but we haven't got any time. And I've been thinking about what he means by that comment. And I'm not sure, but I have at least maybe one suggestion to share with you. I guess what he might mean is whether or not the femicides are going to become so prevalent in the society that they will destabilize it before they're able to be stopped. Maybe the city's violence is going to escalate into chaos. Or maybe what Chucho Flores is saying is also related to what Professor Kessler says in this chapter. This, you'll recall, is at the truck stop where Fate is grabbing a bite to eat, and he's overhearing this conversation by someone named Professor Kessler with another man. Fate doesn't know either of them. But Kessler says that violence is illegible outside of society. And by this, he means outside of polite society. He says that the city of Santa Teresa is moving ahead too fast. So maybe in that regard, the city is booming economically. It's progressing in a lot of the capitalistic ways, but at the same time, everyone is living on the margins of society. There's a lot of poor people, and these femicides are happening to the women that live on these margins of society. So perhaps what this issue about not having enough time, maybe the point that Kessler was making in this conversation kind of underlines that the violence isn't able to be legible yet. It's still illegible because no one is really recognizing it in the right way because it's not happening to the right segments of society. It's a depressing idea, I know, but it's just one thought that I had. And then I also want to talk about a really fascinating character. And I hope she plays a bigger and more important role as the book goes on. Guadalupe Roncal. And she's a reporter that's in Santa Teresa from Mexico City. She's been assigned to go investigate the femicides, and she's very frightened. And she introduces herself one day to Oscar Fate when she overhears him on the telephone talking to his boss back in New York City and requesting that his boss allow him to stay in Santa Teresa for a few more days so that he can write up a story about the femicides. And after he hangs up the phone, Guadalupe Roncal goes up to him and she tells him that who she is, what she's doing, and she tells him that there's a chief suspect that's been arrested for the killings, and he's in prison, and he's been there for some time. She urges Fate to accompany her to the prison to interview him. She's gotten permission to go in and do that, but she's afraid to go alone, and she asks Fate if he will please go with her. She describes the Santa Teresa prison as looking like, quote, a woman who's been hacked to pieces but is still alive. And the prisoners are living inside this woman. It's a really graphic and harrowing image. She's afraid, too, of this chief suspect, not just of the prison, but this chief suspect is a very intimidating man. Based on the photos she's seen of him. She says that he's hugely tall and thin, very thin, with the face of a dreamer, but of a dreamer whose dreams are far ahead of our dreams. And that scares me. And there was one additional thing that she said that really struck my imagination. She said that he has very blue eyes so blue he looks blind. And I knew that I had heard something about Archambalde and his eyes and having the look of a blind man. And I hurried through the previous chapters of our book, and it's true that you might recall that Liz Norton phones El Cerdo, the pig, the guy who allegedly met Archambalde in Mexico City. And she calls him up from Santa Teresa and she says, I need some more details. Need some more description because we're here, we're looking for him, we can't find him. And she asks specifically about Archambalde's eyes. And El Cerdo says, quote, he had the eyes of a blind man. I don't mean he couldn't see, but his eyes were just like the eyes of the blind. So I Don't know whether this is a clue for us, but it feels a little bit too much to be just a coincidence. So anyway, those are some things that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for being part of the Big Book Project. Thank you for watching and listening today. And I look forward to hearing your comments and responses on our Substack. Thank you.